Thanks for checking out my drawing video. This is Drawing with John. Today I have a bit of a different idea. I started out working on a drawing this week, and then I sort of finished it and changed some stuff around. And so this is a drawing. Sometimes my videos have like a stock art element where theoretically you could buy the drawing at the end if you wanted to. This one doesn't have that element. I just wanted to talk about the actual process of drawing something and sometimes how things change. So check out this drawing video. I'll have my commentary over it, and then I'll see you at the end for the outro. All the background music and info and stuff like that is all the same. Jim Wild Spector's doing the background music, and I have contacts and stuff for social media in the description down below. But yeah, this drawing process video is not really about that type of stuff. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks. So here's the inspiration for this drawing. I thought I would draw a guy with a motorcycle that turns into armor. So I wanted to draw the person suspended in midair with the motorcycle sort of coming apart underneath them and reforming into their armor sort of coating. And all based on a Robotech cartoon I used to watch when I was kind of a kid. So here's the initial sketches I did. You could see a lot of figures. I'm trying to figure out where the motorcycle would connect, what it would look like. I don't want it to look exactly like the original cartoon. I want it to look like something else. So here's my drawing phase. I've started working on a second sketch. This one, the figure looks, try to get it more like what I wanted. So I have the hands up like they're just sort of letting go of the handlebars on the motorcycle, and the front wheel coming apart in two pieces. The engine block behind them sort of floating, and then the gas canister part of the motorcycle kind of turning into shoulder sort of connections. And so I wanted this whole thing to be kind of hovering around the figure as they sort of stand there. This time we're just sitting here is where I was going to get my helmet that I was going to use as the reference for this. So this is me drawing the helmet on the character. And I hadn't realized before this, or never really thought about it, but this character ends up kind of looking a bit like a Power Ranger. And I hadn't never really realized before that those Power Ranger helmets are just motorcycle helmets. I hadn't thought about that. But anyway, both of the versions of this that you'll see, the character ends up looking a bit like a Power Ranger by mistake. So this is still just a pencil version. I'm working out what I want the parts of the motorcycle to look like and how much I want it to be turning into armor. And I'm drawing a little sort of nonsense machine bits here to be the connecting parts, little tubes with little bumps on them and sort of squiggly parts that look like pipes and stuff like that. I don't know anything about motorcycles. At this point I changed my mind and I wanted to, instead of having one big wheel on the back, I thought I'd have the back wheel split in half too, like the front wheel. And so I was working out where those wheels would be positioned and what they would look like. You can see the one that's above what would be their left, the character's left arm there, the wheel's a little wonky, and it sort of stays that way just because I'm still working out the whole thing. I'm not paying super close attention to the geometry of the parts. I'm more trying to work out like what I want this to even look like. So I've got this sort of robot part connecting to the chest, like it's gonna, pardon me, that's gonna raise up and attach to the character's chest. And so this is sort of what the pencil design looks like. And so to keep going, I'll start adding ink to this. And as usual, it's always really satisfying to get the ink part down. Once I get the line, here I'm using, again, as usual, I think a 01. These are Stedler pens. Doesn't make any difference what kind of brand of pen, to me anyway. So what's important is that I have a range from about 0.05 to 0.0 to 0.5 for the thicker parts. Sometimes I go up to a 0.8 for the thicker parts. And of course I have my brushes and my inks and stuff like that too for the large black spaces, but this drawing shouldn't have any large black spaces. So here I'm just doing the overall outline, and I want to make sure that I get all of the parts separate. And the pencils, while I'm doing this, it's some people use a light box so that their original drawing is on a sheet of paper underneath the part that they're doing the inks on. It shines through so that they never have any pencil. So far, that's not been my process. I like to draw stuff in pencil and then draw over it in a line. There's just something really kind of simple and normal about that to me, and it's more, I can feel like I have more of a handle on the details, but maybe one day I'll try the lightbox approach. And so here I'm just working out the little machine details, and this is really the fun part for me, is like putting in this little nonsense stuff. I always feel bad thinking about the idea that there might be someone who knows something about how machines actually work or whatever, that don't approach it in the kind of magical way that I do, where there's never any real engines or motors or gears or anything except as a kind of aesthetic. Like I have no idea how the stuff actually works, but I just kind of get a look that sort of evokes it, or try to. So here's me erasing the pencil finally, and then with the pencil gone, you can see some areas need more detail. I was sort of unintentionally relying on the details of the pencil in my pen work there. So getting rid of the pencil makes it clear where I have to add stuff in, and add a little detail to clarify things. And again, the more detail you add to an area, the more attention you're going to draw to it, just because it'll get darker. So the darker places always draw the eye, and so you want to be a little bit careful about making it either, if you want it to be sort of flat, you can have a lot of details everywhere. The eye won't look any particular place. And sometimes that's good. Most of the time that's a bit of a mistake. You want to have slightly darker areas to draw the eye, and then some wide open white spaces for the eye to rest on and stuff. Here I started adding in the outlines, hoping to, like, the thicker line will highlight the actual, separate out the character from the robot and stuff like that. It'll hopefully create the boundaries between the characters. And yeah, unfortunately my camera's a little bit off here, so you're only seeing the top half. I fix it, yeah. And but I'm getting progressively darker and darker, hoping to make the most important parts of this visible, which are the focus on the character's face, and then the focus on the parts of the bike that are coming apart. And so that's the sort of scan of it, the final ink scan. And then I start just thinking about the Copic markers. Here I'm using very, I think it's C1 or something like that, one of the very pale grays, to do all of the mechanical parts in, again hoping to distinguish between the character and the robot. And for the character itself, here I use a warm gray instead, hoping the whole thing, my plan was to have the whole thing sort of gray toned, but using a warmer gray on the human character and the cool gray on the robot to distinguish between them. And I wasn't super happy with the way this was turning out, to be honest. It looks okay, but the character pose is kind of boring. There's something about it that I just sort of didn't find very dynamic. One of the things I discovered that I really liked was I've switched to using Prismacolors here, pencil crayons, to put a little texture on the marker. And it really makes a nice metal texture, I find, with the black Prismacolor being used just for a little bit of shading on metal surfaces that makes it seem like the reflected world around the metal object or whatever. It's got a nice sort of, not a thick Prismacolor, just a very sort of thin layer of pencil. It really makes a nice sort of look. And that's a scan of the final drawing. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really happy with the way that this turned out. So what I planned to do, I decided to, I like the general idea and it's fun to do, but I don't like the sort of undynamic pose, a kind of static up and down of this. And there's not much dimension to it. So I thought I would try to create something with a bit more dimension. So I went back to the drawing board, literally, and I started with a kind of more of a Spider-Man type of pose here, of like a character up in the air, like leaping up. And I thought that this would make a sort of a more interesting character because a more interesting depiction of this because the legs are sort of coming forward and the arms are going back, and it's got a dimensionality to it, so it'll be more interesting to look at. And so this time around, I don't have to worry about the design of the vehicle. I know all of that stuff. I worked it out in the first drawing, so that part is going really quickly. And I'm just thinking about the dynamic sort of pose. So here, I've got the arms. I've got the sort of forearm armor around them, like it's going to clamp down on the arms. I've got the legs up, like they're sort of rising out of the seat. And I decided to draw some sort of jet boosts out of the bottom to make it really clear that the person is sort of shooting up in the air. And all of the other stuff I already kind of worked out in the other drawing about how I want the character to look. So that part I don't have to worry about anymore. And that's one of the benefits of, being willing to draw the whole thing out, work on it, and then, think of it as a series of drafts that's just going to be kind of ongoing. And, you don't want to be doing this kind of experimentation when you're doing a drawing for a client and you're working on a timeline, and it's not really the time to be experimenting with ways of doing things. But these types of drawings, especially for this YouTube series, I thought it would be perfect to show how you don't always realize how things are going to go until you do them. And part of drawing is, I think, becoming a good sort of pen and ink type of person is doing stuff and then being willing to do it over and over again, relying on the drafting process to really work out the details on paper. And I think that a lot of people get jammed up worrying about making mistakes, and I just don't think that that's something that the real artists out there will encourage you to go out and just make all of the mistakes that you can. You can always start a new drawing. There's always more pieces of paper and more pencils and stuff, and just go out and try it, see how it looks. And even in the process of doing something, the end product you're not super happy with, you still learn a lot of interesting material for your next drawing. So that's sort of how I'm approaching this thing. The idea is really just for fun, but it's slowly turning into something more dynamic. So now I've switched to doing, for my pencils, I've switched to doing line art again, and you could see me going over my pencil lines, doing the outlines the way that I always do. And that takes a bit of time, but again, there's you're working out the details, and while I'm doing this, I'm thinking about what I want the shading to look like and what I'm trying to focus the eye on when I'm drawing. So when I want someone looking at it, what do I want them to see? So that those type of issues are what govern the kind of detailing that I do. And so in this case, I'm really trying to make clear the sort of organic shape of the human is being surrounded and kind of overtaken by the metallic shapes of the robots. So we want to have plenty of intersection there of the metallic parts coming, blocking out parts of the body, crossing over the parts of the body, making it clear that it's being kind of wrapped up. And I kept basically the same outfit. I'm just putting in the little zipper, and I made up a little badge for him to have on his chest for no reason. That doesn't really signify anything. There's a lot of tiny details that are just to add to the overall impression. These are all still 01 pen, but I'll switch to doing more outlines in a moment, and that'll help to again work on the definition between the character and the robot to make sure that it sort of stands out, especially against a large white background like this. A good thick outline looks good. So one of the things I'm doing here, you can see me do it on these wheels a bit in the front, is that I'm cleaning up the smaller lines in the process of doing the outline. So one of the, trying to make sure that the lines, if there's something a little wonky about the shape, you can use the darker line to go over and try to sort of straighten it out, or in the case of these ovals, try to make them more uniform so that the whole thing looks a little bit better. There's a lot of chances to fix little mistakes in your drawings, and that outlining process is one of them, where you can go, you can also use white gel markers to go over if you've got a line that's bothering you or something like that. You can sort of cover it up with a white gel pen. But in here, I'm just adding little, like, tinier bits of detailing and shading. Most of this is not is for the texture, because I'm going to color these in using markers, so I'm not really worried about the shading itself, and more the texture of the sort of substrate of the shading. So the markers are transparent, and you'll be able to still see these lines right through them. So adding those little lines is something that helps to create an additional layer of texture to the thing, and to make the difference between the metallic textures on the robot and the other textures on the suit. These sort of organic materials. So this is the final line art here, scanned. That's kind of what it looked like. And then after that, I'm just going to start with the coloring. And so I had this on the last version. I used the warm grays, and I just kind of found that looked not that good. So we decided this time to just give him a green and black suit. And so I'm applying the green Copics with the way that I do them anyway. The Copics are always like the lightest color first, and then you add in a little shading, and then you go back over it with a lighter color again to blend them. So that's what's nice about Copics, is that you can, because it's an ink-based marker, the pigment kind of floats there for a bit before it gets fixed. So as long as you do it quickly, you can just you can draw multiple layers on, and they'll all blend together by the time they're dry. Even now, looking at this, it looks more blended than this once it had completely dried. So, and now I'm going back with my light gray. I've got a gray refill here because my gray started to croak, and so I'm just adding more ink as I go. I'm using the original sort of dried out marker as a kind of dip pen, and just putting ink on it, and then painting on the gray ink. I'll refill those later, but in the middle of a drawing, wasn't really the time to take it all apart and fill it out. So this is the beginning of the colored version of this drawing, and I want the suit to eventually be black and green, and the machine I'm going to leave the cool gray. So this is just a slightly darker gray, and I'm going through the same sort of process, but I'm trying to add sort of starker contrasts on the metallic stuff, because of how shiny metals are. They reflect light differently, and so the shadows are always more crisp. The organic, like the suit, I wanted to blend in, but the metal stuff I don't want it to blend at all. So I'm skipping from C1 to C5 here in my shadows, and instead of using the more closely a closer gray to have it blend in a little bit better, I'm making it more stark. And then I have an even darker gray that I'm going through and adding these details to the outside, just to increase the contrast between the metallic parts and the suit that the guy is wearing. So I wanted there to be sort of yellow piping on this suit, and so the easiest way for me to do most of that is to just color that whole section yellow, and then make the part that I wanted black, and leave just the edges yellow, so that instead of trying to leave a little line of white that I could then color in yellow later, which never works, It's easier to just do the lightest colors first and then put the dark stuff on top of them, with these markers at least. So that's my process with this. There'll be like sort of yellow piping along his arms and along his legs. His knee pads are yellow, obviously, and there's a bit of a yellow shine on his boots. All of this is just sort of highlighted type of stuff. The reflection on the helmet visor I just left by drawing around it, so it sort of just kind of hangs there without needing any kind of more work. I thought about going through with a darker pencil later when I'm doing the Prismacolor pencil crayon on the metal and adding some details to the helmet, but it looked okay without it, so I just didn't bother to add sort of unnecessary detail. Here I'm doing some stippling in the clouds and stuff with the smoke coming off of the jets, similar to what I used in the demon drawing that is the first of this series here, all that stippling effect. It's good for a background type of thing, and it looks nice in clouds or other sort of insubstantial things. Here I had a sort of darker color put on the headlight, and I'm just getting ready to. I put some white acrylic paint over the marker once it had dried, and the black Prismacolor pencil and the white acrylic paint are the best kind of highlights that I found so far for these sort of metallic things. So the Prismacolor pencil adds a nice layer of sort of reflective shadow onto things, and then I'll go through afterwards with a thin brush on with some white acrylic paint on it, and add in the highlights on the metal where I want them. And there's just a few here. It's not a ton of highlights, but it's just a little spots where I think it's gotten too dark and I've lost some detail, or I just want to create a little bit of contrast. Just make it look a little bit more metallic. So yeah, this is basically it. I mean, I'm just adding on to little details, but this is more what I wanted to do when I did this drawing. Something a little bit more, his arms stretching out in the back, his feet way up forward, a sort of long thing, and you get a feeling of the process of transformation. So yeah, that's it. That's the drawing. So that's the drawing. I hope you liked sort of this process of going through things, changing, deciding that I didn't like the way something looked, or that it wasn't good enough, and starting from scratch and doing something different. That's the way drawing goes sometimes. You're drawing mostly for the fun of doing it and learning things, and not so much for some end goal or whatever. In the end, even people who do illustrations professionally still are drawing 95% for themselves, and the value of it, the value of any drawing is really enjoying drawing and doing the drawing that you want to do and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I didn't want all of these videos to be about illustration and working, selling illustrations, or like just a giant ad for the stuff that I do. That's really way less important than talking about drawing and creating something for people to enjoy who like drawing. Anyway, so that's it for this episode. Next week we'll be doing something totally different, but yeah. So like I said in the intro, check out my social media stuff, and check out Jim Wild stuff too, and on Bandcamp or wherever. And yeah, so I'll see you next time. Bye.